One.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Bramante. I am the president of the National Center for Competency-Based Learning. 5 years ago, I had an idea. My sense was that an opportunity was available for us to piggyback on the first in the nation New Hampshire Presidential Primary. Every 4 years, the world's media descends upon our little state and gives the New Hampshire citizens the job of helping to choose America's next president. I thought, with that world media focus on New Hampshire, do we have an opportunity to send out a message that America and the world wants to hear and needs to hear? So this year, we decided to do something about it. We're convening the National Presidential Youth Convention to be held before the primary at the Southern New Hampshire University Arena in the heart of Manchester. Our thinking was to create the world's greatest civics lesson. That's a tall statement. How do you create the world's greatest civics lesson? And what would that lesson be? Will we gather 5,000 students together so that at the end of the event, they can all name in order the presidents of the United States? That's not it. The world's greatest civics lesson will be one that improves the knowledge and skills of all of us to speak in civil tones to one another on the challenging issues of our time. It's a lesson in civility. We are thrilled that our great governor, Chris Sununu, has agreed to interrupt his busy schedule, fly to DC in order to participate in iCivics National Civics Learning Week to announce our effort to the civics community of America. But this effort is not just about New Hampshire. This is about all of us. Collectively, we need to turn the tide on this lack of civility that too many of us have been caught up in. We need to build the civility muscle of America's citizens, and we will start with our students. It is our hope that we will, with the help of the best civics minds in America, be able to come together to build that lesson that will last far longer than this effort and become an embedded part of virtually every civics lesson in every civics classroom in America on into the future. But even beyond that, this lesson will translate into how we interact with family, friends, co-workers, and in conversations that we have in public places, including online. Civility is the key to moving America forward in order to create that more perfect union. Civility is embedded in the structure of our government, designed at its core to enable us to have challenging conversations for over 2 centuries. But the roar of politics, amplified by the media, especially social media, has become so loud that we need to become purposeful in developing a strong counterbalance. We need to start the civility movement. We invite all like-minded citizens, organizations, businesses, and schools who see the danger to our nation and our democracy caused by this lack of civility. We're not pointing fingers. Both sides are guilty. Turn back this tide is going to take an effort from all of us. Republicans, Democrats, independents, we are all Americans. We love our country. We're asking you to join our movement. We're asking you to become a pioneer in turning the tide of incivility. Please join the civility movement at civicsancivility.org. That's civicsancivility.org. We can't wait to work with you. Thank you very much. Matt?
Thanks, Fred. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here and honored to be moderating this panel. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves just very briefly. I've been a social studies teacher here in New Hampshire for 25 years. I'm also a school principal, and I teach at the college level when I have time. It is incredibly important to get involved in our communities, whether it is on a land use board, whether it is running for office. We need more people involved, and we need people to work civilly, as Fred said, with each other. Our guests today represent the best of Granite Staters. They are actively involved in their schools and communities to educate and improve the lives of those around them. And perhaps, as Fred said, there's never been a better time or a more important time for increased civics education, involvement, and civility. And in most cases, I'm going to make the pitch here for more civics education. In most states, civics education has been put on the back burner. If you look at the investment the federal government has made in civics, it is also probably at an all-time low. According to the Annenberg Civics Knowledge Survey, only about 40% of Americans can name the 3 branches of government. 20% can't name one. And so we need to start here with civics education. I would love to see more people do what Charlie, you'll meet Charlie in a minute, has done and get involved. And he has been a motivating force for others around him. Our discussion today centers on that increased need for civics education involvement and improving civility across our country. And this is something that the upcoming National Presidential Youth Convention will be addressing. So this event will bring together students, educators, civic leaders, presidential candidates with the aim to spark a youth effort to return civility to public discourse and maybe influence presidential candidates when they come here to New Hampshire to do just that. So I'm going to say later, it's going to be kids like Charlie that are going to teach up what civil discourse is for all of us. So why don't we start with Jackie, if you would introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to Kelsey and finish with Charlie.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Jackie Gillette. I am a 50-year, as of June, educator. I have been a classroom teacher, principal, superintendent, many districts across my career. Now I'm a retired superintendent, but a consultant and definitely a civic advocate. I continue to be very involved in a number of boards and opportunities to increase the quality of discourse and the quality of education for our young people, since, trite though it sounds, they are our future. Thank you.
My name is Kelsey Eckert. I am the coordinator for social studies education at Plymouth State University, New Hampshire's original teachers college. And I have been I was a high school social studies teacher for about a decade before I assumed this role. I'm also the coordinator for National History Day in the state of New Hampshire. So I represent New Hampshire in that organization, and I coordinate all our groups that go down to DC for that event every year. I'm also the president of the Remedial History Project, which is a nonprofit working to get women's history into the K-12 curriculum, which includes civics education. And my tie to civics, importantly, is that I started my career with a bachelor's degree in political science before getting my master's in social studies ed. But my job is training future social studies teachers who go off into middle and high school classrooms around the state. And I cannot agree more that we need more civility, and we start that right here in our classroom. So I'm excited for this conversation.
My name is Charlie Olson. I was the 2021 New Hampshire Kid Governor. I ran to help kids who are suffering with mental health challenges like depression. I was fortunate to be able to speak up and help kids that were struggling with mental health. During the COVID lockdowns, I was diagnosed with situational depression. Since then, I made it my goal to support people who are suffering and to eliminate the stigma around mental health. Over the past 2 years, I've been lucky enough to work with so many mental health advocates, nonprofits, and people who have worked through mental health challenges. I was the recipient of the 2021 Eric Cogwell Memorial Award, which is presented annually by Seacoast Mental Health Center to recognize an individual for their outstanding contributions to improve the lives of people living with bipolar disorder and other mental illnesses. That's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you all for those introductions. As I said before, it's a talented group of people. We'll start with some questions, and I have questions aimed at each of you, but feel free to go freeform if you want, because it make it a little more interactive. Jackie, I'd like to start with you in your years, and you told us how many years you've been doing this work. Why do you think we have lost civility in our public discourse? And do you have any ideas how we could remedy that problem?
Well, certainly over the breadth of my career, I have seen changes creeping into our communities, our family lives, our community lives, and definitely in our schools. And I don't know that I'm wise enough, even after all my years, to know why that is. I just know that every year the challenges increase because it is a truth that we're all living with. I do think that a movement like this, the opportunity to strengthen civics education, to talk with our parents, our communities, and our school people to help us illuminate the need for a return to civility is our pathway forward.
Great, thank you. Any other ideas of how we could get back to being more civil in our public discourse?
Well, Matthew, one thing I just wanted to add as a sort of resident historian here is there's a big shift that's happened as a result of social media, which you already sort of spoke to. And one of the things that I think is sort of interesting is that when we look back at a lot of social movements in the past, you see a lot of young activists in visual representation of those movements. You know, I'm thinking civil rights or earlier movements. Even women's suffrage. And while that's true, a lot of the organizers in those groups were older, but social media has sort of blown that up, where you don't necessarily need to be an older organizer. You are a young person with a microphone and maybe not the background on how these various systems work that you're trying to disrupt. So I think it's kind of an interesting time where we have this new technology that's changing how we make change, but I think it's also contributing to the lack of civility in this space.
Agreed.
Charlie, do you have anything to add?
I think that social media has been a great opportunity for young people to be able to express themselves and how they have experienced mental health and how they've gone through it and how they can support others.
Great. Charlie, I have a question for you. So this is we're talking about the National Presidential Youth Convention, and you're actively involved at a young age in local and state issues. Why is it important for people to attend this convention?
I think it starts with solving problems. When I was elected kid governor, I was given a voice. Kids elected me kid governor because I chose to speak up about my topic, and it affected so many kids in 2020, which is mental health. An event like the National Presidential Youth Convention will give kids that same voice. Before I even knew that the Kid Governor program existed, I had to write a personal narrative in my language arts class. I chose to write about my experience during COVID and my depression. That writing piece became the catalyst to my Kid Governor platform. Fast forward to 2021, and during my inauguration, Governor Sununu put $3 million in the state budget for children's mental health. I could have never imagined that my language arts assignment would have had such an impact. Impact starts with one small step, which is showing up. You show up to the event and you share your thoughts with others. Those thoughts and ideas turn into solutions, and that solution turns into progress. I was one kid governor with one goal. Imagine the impact that hundreds of kids will have when they work together.
Great, thank you, Charlie. I can say, having seen your video, your message stuck with me in my work in schools, how much kids were struggling and teachers were struggling during that time. So one small step, right, has these ripple effects, right? And so that's a question, Kelsey, I had for you. A convention like this, what kind of ripple effects do you think this will have for civic involvement and improving civility in our public discourse?
My model, I use the inquiry model of instruction in my classes. It is the model endorsed by the National Council for the Social Studies, and I think it's a really appropriate one for helping deal with the challenges of this time. But one of the things that's so amazing about this is that we center the instruction around questions. And one of the things that I find in conversations that turn really not civil really quickly is that we've lost track of like what the question is that we disagree on, because we're only talking about the answers that we're providing, our conclusions that we've come to, and that's where the disagreements are. Sometimes we forget that the question's actually like much deeper, and I think what we all need to work on is getting better at framing those questions. The neat thing about a gathering like this that I think has so much power is when we start to frame questions around around meaning, right? I think that is where the power happens. That's where real breakthroughs can happen. That's where our agreements rather than our disagreements can come out, because we're trying to look at the question and look at all the data and all the information that we have. But I think it comes from really framing the conversation well as a group. And so I love what this group is doing, because it's saying, all right, let's frame our conversations around civility and how can we have these civil conversations. And then if, you know, it's such a cool ripple effect opportunity, because if a bunch of dissimilar people can come together and have these conversations, imagine how dinner table conversations happen. You know, and I feel bad for uncles, because I feel like they get thrown under the bus as like the person who's always proposing radical positions at the dinner table. But, you know, think about that. If you can have a civil conversation with a bunch of kids that you feel have really different perspectives and backgrounds and can come to a conversation, imagine how we can now navigate those more complicated family dynamics at the dinner table. So I think it's really powerful, because it's giving everybody, including young people, a framework for having conversations, for civility. And, you know, I would just add a layer to, it's not just about being civil, right? Like, we need to learn how to disagree with each other well. We also need to learn how to see how, like, oh, we really disagree on the meaning of something. I haven't really ever had a conversation with somebody where we maybe disagree on how we should vote or whom we should vote for, but at the end of the day, we kind of agree on the meaning, and we've just concluded really different paths to voting. I find that it's a really common experience, actually. So I really like the reframing, and I think it has a huge power. And my hope is that when young people begin to expect different of their elected officials and of each other, that can actually have an impact, because when young people are awed and inspired by really radical and rude people, it fuels those radical and rude people. And we want young people to expect different and expect better of their elected officials. And so I'm really excited, because I think we're seeing now young people are learning how to use social media platforms better. They are providing more accurate information. They're learning to check each other and to hold each other accountable to nasty behavior online. And I think the more young people demand that, the more they're going to be able to use this wonderful mic that they've been given to make social change. So I'm excited to see them demand more, especially of adults.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Well said. You know, I just started my first term in the New Hampshire House as a representative here, or East Concord, and I was struck by the fact that we have divided seating. And so I'm in section 3, which is mixed seating, but sections 1 and 2 are for one political party, and sections 4 and 5 are for another. And so what struck me about that is it's contrary to the work that we do in education, where we come together to share ideas. And we want kids and people with different ideas to sit next to each other, to talk, to learn to each other, and to do so, you know, in a respectful manner. So, Jackie, if you could comment, you've seen education evolve for many years. If you could comment, what you think kind of an impact increased civics education and, you know, events like this convention will have for the next generation of Americans?
That's a great question. I think that we, within our own country, within our own communities, within our own schools, have not highlighted the use of civility in our work, our learning, our planning for the future. And I think we've become a country that is really fractured, and people are being allowed to be uncivil to each other when we have huge possibilities as a country. But we're getting lost in the weeds of impolite discourse. And so I think for us to refocus our country's future, we have to bring back the tenets of a civil discourse to our future. or we're going to continue to wander and not move forward in a progressive way.
I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons for that too is just the way that politics works, right? And I think what Matt was speaking to about the way they're literally seating people in opposition to one another, right? And I think that's just so sad, because if you look at like any issue that we are voting on and making decisions on in legislatures around the country, it's Americans are not divided on a lot of these issues. They actually find, they have more middled perspectives on a lot of things. And that division doesn't allow, things that we could all take action on right now to move forward. Kind of a lack of progress. So I think we want to really push back on anything. Part of becoming more civil is pushing back on anything that tries to polarize us. Like that's really the enemy here is you're making me be polarized. And I want to be right where I am. Don't move me.
Right. Yeah, and these are choices. The choice to have divided seating is a choice made by leadership. And so in our committees, most of our votes are, relatively clear. 20-0, 19-1, 17-3. But what gets highlighted is when we disagree. And that's what gets broadcast on the news. So Charlie, I have a question for you. If you're at this convention and you meet a presidential candidate, right, somebody who wants to be the leader of this country and one of the leaders of the free world, huge influence, right? Important people, an important job. What would you say to that candidate about needing to be more civil in the work?
That's a great question. Webster's dictionary defines civility as formal politeness and courtesy in behavior or speech. If our politicians could practice civility, they would understand that they have way more in common with each other than they realize. By working together on the things they have in common, they can actually make progress for issues that are important for our citizens in the country. As the younger generations get involved with politics and voting, they aren't going to want to vote for someone that's being uncivil. We don't want our leaders constantly arguing and pointing fingers at each other. We want a leader that goes and fixes the problems that we have at hand. My platform was focused on the mental health of children. I don't think anyone disagrees that that's an important topic. With depression and suicide on the rise of young adults, politicians pointing fingers and blaming each other, that doesn't solve any problems. I had the opportunity to give a speech on my platform to the governor in his executive council at the Institute of Politics. My speech was interrupted by aggressive shouting, chanting, and like people storming around the room. It was crazy. I was able to finish my speech, but the rest of the executive council had to cancel the meeting for the safety of everyone in the room. My mom and I were even escorted out of the room by state police to our car. I think the lack of civility in our leaders leads to the lack of civility in our citizens. I'm a student athlete. I look at what athletes are doing, and people are always saying that athletes should be role models for kids, but I don't think we hold our politicians to the same standards. Politicians can model civility for our country. Because of the protests, the executive council wasn't able to talk about the important issues of the day, and decisions couldn't be made, and progress was stunted. I think civility would have led to way more progress.
Charlie,
Those are such good points. And I just wanted to say one point of, I think you talked about people shouldn't vote for these people that are polarizing us and being really nasty people. And I really love your point. And I think the sad history of the last few decades really is that people do vote for these people. And I think what this event can do for all of us is to expect better and to help us realize that when people are nasty and polarizing, it actually doesn't lead to a lot of good stuff getting done for people, right? So I think we all have a tendency to be like, yeah, that person said the thing that I feel. But just because they said the thing that you feel in a nasty way doesn't mean it's going to be a productive way to pass policy, right? We all need to sort of like check that emotion. So I love the stuff that you're doing. And I'm really, really sorry that happened to you while you're trying to do something and advocate in such an important way. Sounds horrible.
Jackie, it sounded like you had something you wanted to add.
I'm just frankly delighted by what Charlie brings to our table, to our discussion. And when you pair him with what Kelsey has in terms of her background and perspective, I'm sitting here today developing a real sense of hope.
So in my community, there are many new Americans. These are people who have left countries where they could not live lives without fear of violence or starvation or some other tragedies. And I have seen the best of the opportunity of the United States. And there's a young man in my community who has stepped up, much like Charlie, to really take the lead. He is going to planning board meetings. He is going to House committee meetings. And he is just saying, I want to be involved and I want to help. I've been given this opportunity. And so, Charlie, how do we get more young people to actually get involved? Because we have to have them involved, and then we can work on the civility, right? And I think just by being involved, they will act more civilly towards each other the more they're part of the community.
I feel like nowadays you'll go and you'll see these leaders that like they'll have their debates and all they're doing is accusing each other and arguing. I don't think that would attract anybody to want to get involved. And so I feel like the first step is people really understanding and having a civil conversation and trying to understand each other. Because when it comes down to arguments, people are like, no, that's wrong because whatever. It should be, I see your point, but I disagree because I feel like when it's more open for people to share their opinions, it's easier for people to get involved and to want to contribute to the cause.
Charlie, what an important piece you just said, that validating, right? I validate that that thing you said is really meaningful and important to you. And here's why I disagree, right? But if we don't validate that something's like very real for a person, then it can go nowhere. That's such an important piece. I so agree.
It really is. I would love to just jump in a bit in terms of saying to somebody as you're listening to them making a point that's important. In your head today, I find so many people are saying, yes, but, and they're building their rebuttal. They're not listening. And if you are not feeling valued and listened to, you step back. After so many times, you just step back.
Jackie, you were talking about hope before. I love working with young people. I work with young people every single day, and it gives me so much hope. But one of the things that I've heard from them is actually a lack of hope about engaging. And like, why would I get involved? Why would I, engage in these political processes? And especially like what Charlie's talking about, when you're seeing it be so nasty and broken up. And I think one of the ways that we, especially, in legislatures where the average age is not young. And so, how do young people see themselves existing? In New Hampshire, we've got a serious problem because our legislature is designed in a way that really makes it difficult for young people and young families in particular to be involved in at the legislative level. It's really difficult because of it's an unpaid, it's like what, $100 a year is a really low salary. It makes it really difficult. And so I think we all need to be engaged in creating ways, we talk about diversity and inclusion, and this is an age issue, we don't have a diverse legislature. We have a really old legislature. So we need to be involved in structural changes that actually make it possible for young people to engage. But we also need to show young people that even if you can't sit in those seats, you can still be involved in a million other ways, writing letters to people, making phone calls. There's a lot of work that young people can do beyond bullying each other online about politics to engage in the process. And they need to feel hope about it.
Absolutely. Right. In my work with middle school students in particular, we teach these students to, instead of the yes, but, like Jackie said, to yes, and to continue the conversation, to learn more.
Huge distinction.
Yep. And what I like to say to the students is, are you thinking of a way to win an argument here, or are you trying to learn? Right. So if in your head, while you're listening to somebody talk, you're thinking about the way to disagree to win the argument, you're shutting down learning, right? And so I think that this idea, and it starts with us in education, I believe, right? To teach students how to have these conversations, like Charlie was saying, and like both Kelsey and Jackie, you were saying. I heard yesterday that there are states that have their meetings in the legislature starting at 4 o'clock. There are states that provide childcare. There are states that provide health insurance through the state system. So these are structural ways that we could change to get more people involved who are working parents, who have to work to survive, who don't have the flexibility, like people like I do, to do this work. Once we change that structure, maybe then more people will get involved, because it seems like we're getting more of the extremes involved. People with a cause come to, run for office and get involved. Perhaps we can change that. And when we have more people who want to learn from each other, if they have the opportunity to be involved, maybe the discourse will change as well. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to have all of you, if you would make one final sort of comment to wrap up your thoughts today. And then Fred, if you would like to make a final comment, and then we will we'll end for today. Let's start with Jackie.
Thank you. As Charlie did, I also looked up in the dictionary what the definition of civility was, and also used Merriam-Webster. But I did some more reading, some more thinking, and I think it comes down to me for what is the way a citizen of our country at his or her best could be behaving. Courtesy, respect, dignity, tolerance, thinking about others' points of view. And as you said, Matt, instead of winning the argument, learning because of the disagreement, the points of view that are different.
Kelsey.
I want to capitalize on something Jackie said earlier, which is just the importance of listening to one another. Social media makes it really easy to put something out there in the world and to say your ideas. But I think it's teaching us that we can say our stuff and not necessarily absorb the reactions that we might get from people. And there's a lot of really important listening skills. One of the ones I think I would love for everybody, adults, definitely, to model better is just repeating back what you think you heard to somebody. There's a lot of mishearing that goes on, a lot of words taken out of context, especially in the political arena where complex ideas are broken down to a soundbite. And, and then of course, in the social studies, one of the tenets of our work is just teaching people to check their source of information for reliability and double check yourself before you reshare something or, that sort of stuff. I just think we all need to be better about really making sure we understand our source before we go and mount a full-scale attack on those ideas. I find that the more I listen to people, the more their perspective actually makes a lot of sense to me. And though even we might not vote the same on that issue, I understand why they're voting the way they are from their perspective. And it makes it a lot easier to be empathetic and compassionate with the vote that they've made. There's studies that are showing that Democrats and Republicans across the board are starting to think that the other side are, incompetent, idiotic, wrong, that sort of thing. And I'm just so sad to see that, because it's just evidence that we're not listening to things that are deeply meaningful to both sides of the issue. And I think young people can start to be a model for something that clearly adults have lost.
Great.
Amen.
Absolutely.
I would just like to add on to what everyone else is saying about people not listening. I personally think that if both sides would just listen to each other about their points of view, whether it's through political or just your everyday life, understanding what the other side sees, that way you can make a compromise and work together. When we're voting, I find people nowadays vote for the most extreme, most aggressive person that they support. I think people should vote on the person that makes the most current difference and people that want to fix the most current issues and trying to help the community with what's going on right now, not what's been the issue for the past 20 years and they're trying to improve over time.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Fred, you've been sitting here listening to this. And before I wrap it up, any final words based on the conversation we've had here today?
I thank you so much, Matt. I can't tell you how proud I am listening to this discussion. That clearly there's a very, very serious issue that I think all Americans get, or at least the majority of Americans get. And I believe that that a lot of people are going to want to become part of this. And if it becomes a movement, it will be because of people like the folks on this panel, like Charlie and Kelsey. Jackie's already on the team, but Charlie and Kelsey, I want to invite you guys. We would be honored to have you, and Matt as well. We'd be honored to have you participating with us and make this a big deal. The comments here, I think, have been fantastic. I can't wait till we post this in various places for other people to see, because I think that when they listen to this conversation, they are going to be convinced by the words that you guys put forward. And let's go get this done.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fred. I'm thinking about the people watching this, and if this resonates with you, the conversation we've been having, and if you agree, or I guess if you disagree, but you want to be part of a solution that we all, I think, recognize as a problem, hopefully you'll participate in the National Presidential Youth Convention. You can look that up again at, Fred, what is it again, the website?
Civicsancivility.org.
Civicsancivility.org. All right, great. So you can head there. I checked out the website. It's brand new, just up, I think, yesterday. If you can't make it, get out there, get involved, and be kind to one another.
Absolutely. And if I could add one tiny thing to that, at the end of the show, at the end of the convention, and it's going to be, we haven't set the date yet. It's going to be sometime before the New Hampshire primary, but we're going to have a concert with Recycle Percussion, the purveyors of chaos and kindness. And so we think we've got a great partner in them. We expect that we're going to have a lot of fun that day, and we're going to, and we're all going to get something great out of it. What I want to come out of it, I want more Charlies and Kelseys. That's what I'm looking for, is that folks come out of that day with the skills that they need to engage in these challenging conversations. Matt, thank you so much for helping this beautiful conversation to take place.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah, so it's been a great conversation. I think this is the beginning for us, right? I'm going to make sure that my students here at my school see this video, and I'm going to try to use that to spark them to get more involved, and just to continue the work that Charlie and the other New Hampshire Kid Governors have done. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you, Ken, who is behind the scenes here, and get out there and let's make a difference.